I'm delighted now to be joined by Chidera Ageru, aka the Slumflower, best-selling author of What a Time to Be Alone and How to Get Over a Boy, and the creator of hashtag Saggy Boobs Matter. And we're going to be discussing how to find your authentic self and bring it into your everyday life. Chidera, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm really happy to be here today.
Oh, good. Oh, we're glad to have you. And now you are someone that oozes self-confidence and has built a career around encouraging other women to do the same. How did you come to work out exactly who your authentic self is?
I love that question. I think the process of working out who your authentic self is, it's a lifelong one, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to have moments that really stand out along the way. For me, I've had various waves of realization of who I am and who I deserve to show up as, and weaving that authentically into how I express myself. And so when we talk about being our authentic selves, we mainly focus the conversation on the more positive and outgoing side of it. But I think the hard part about embracing your authentic self is also showing up in moments where it is uncomfortable, where it does challenge you or challenge another person. Because sometimes challenging another person is a challenge to yourself. If you're conflict averse, if you're anxious or shy, if you're not used to taking up space or advocating for yourself. And I think all these things combine to add to your authenticity, because we're not only authentic when we're being positive and encouraging other people. I think we're also being authentic when we do say, hey, this doesn't feel right and I would like to explain why, or hey, I feel like I need to be listened to, or hey, this isn't working for me anymore. Both those things matter. So I think for me, my authentic self becomes more and more tangible the more I welcome the duality of who I am and learning to sit in that complexity.
That was going to be my next question, in fact, in terms of, has this been a difficult journey for you? And you've just touched on some of the more difficult elements of actually getting to your most authentic self, having those challenging times. So how do you ensure that you are remaining authentic whilst being challenged?
Yeah, remaining authentic whilst being challenged is such a hard one, because sometimes our authentic response to being challenged is being defensive, whilst other times our authentic response to being challenged is investigating and looking inwards and welcoming introspection. So I feel like there's a time and a place for a certain version of ourselves, because I remember a past version of myself that has been defensive and has been averse to new information. And I'm not saying that version of myself won't reappear in future, but it's that in certain moments, welcoming authenticity means learning that this challenge is somehow, somewhere there's a benefit in it. For me, this past year, and including 2020, has been really challenging in confronting my authenticity, because I saw the way the world changed, not just in us being restricted physically, but also in the way social attitudes took a huge change in direction, and we all started to become more honest about how our leaders are failing us, and how the brands that we're buying into are also failing us, and how our taxes are being used to fund violence. And we're really being honest and confrontational about all of this. And what's hard about that, being in the position that I'm in, where I'm a public figure, I'm an author, I'm known to a certain degree, is that sometimes embracing your authenticity in public can put you in danger, whether it's the danger that comes with losing out on opportunities to work, or losing out on certain members of your audience, or being misunderstood. But a part of me still believes that as long as you are moving towards authenticity, you have to accommodate that there is going to be some sort of loss or fallout. Like, I would honestly rather lose out on people who follow me from a place where they've perceived me for what I'm not, than to have followers or an audience full of people that are admiring a version of me that doesn't actually exist. And so the difficult thing with embracing authenticity, whether you're a public figure or you're just a person who goes by living their life, minding their business, is that it's never going to be easy, but that's what makes it worth it. And yeah, I guess I'm trying every day more and more to accept that there's going to be times where I find it really hard, and I can only be kind to myself, because it's kindness that allows us to feel encouraged enough to try again, rather than speaking horribly to yourself when you do catch yourself either being inauthentic or repeating something that you thought you'd learned from.
And on this path to authenticity, surely there's going to be moments that when you are either being challenged or you are challenging yourself, and that maybe you're going to require some help from those outs, from beyond your own means on this journey. So how do you do that in a way that doesn't leave you feeling even more vulnerable at those vulnerable times?
As someone who has learned to become really hyper independent due to experiencing rejection early in my life, I feel that it's definitely made me, and I'm sure there are many people who relate to this, I find it really hard to ask for help. If anything, there's a weird satisfaction and virtue that I derive from doing something really hard by myself, and it's not a good habit to form at all. Because
I can be someone who holds the hand up and says, yeah, I'm guilty of that too.
I think the largest reason behind this hyper independence a lot of us have formed, I think, is largely due to capitalism and feeling like we have to earn our value, and the idea of meritocracy, and feeling like if I ask for help, it does make me vulnerable and people get to say that they played a role in my greatness. And you know what? That's actually the truth. It is okay. And I think the people that we look up to as really, really great, I'll use Beyonce as a wonderful example. Beyonce had help. She had community. She had people that encouraged her. She had singing lessons. She had all sorts of people showing her the way. And that's normally how it's supposed to work in an ideal world, free from capitalism, where we have community, because we are all a combination of each other. Like, we have mannerisms from people that we love, or like internal jokes or ways of being that we don't even notice that have come from the people around us. And if we looked at it more in that way, I think we would look at seeking help less as being put in a vulnerable position. And actually, it's a strength, because we're stronger together, quite literally, and not even in the corny way, but literally we're stronger together. And I think when we change looking at help as like this transaction, because sometimes help will be a transaction, like if you're paying a singing teacher, that's transactional, doesn't mean it's not a pure relationship. But there will be times where you need to lean on somebody in your community, whether it's your friendship circle, and not feeling like there's this gaping hole of now you're going to have to owe them something. It's from a place of love. And I think when we really learn to be gentle with ourselves and we see ourselves as a child asking for help, it makes it easier to visualize yourself being worthy of help. Because when I imagine a 4-year-old asking me for help, I'm not going to be like, so you can't do it yourself? Like, that's the weirdest thing ever. It makes me feel horrible. But then I'm like, why can't I extend that grace to myself? What makes me different to a 4-year-old other than I'm physically bigger, but at heart I'm still that same 4-year-old? So I think it comes down to gentleness, and all these themes of like hyper independence, authenticity. It's all still pulling back to this central point of like really loving yourself enough to take things slow, or loving yourself enough to sometimes be angry at how you've been treated and wanting something different for yourself, and actively seeking that and making sacrifices along the way, because what you get out of it will be worth all the things you've left behind.
And again, as part of this process, I suppose like a really difficult element of ending up as or on the path to the continual path of becoming your most authentic self, there's not an end point to that, is going to be disappointing people. So you mentioned earlier about challenging people, and along that way you're going to be disappointing some people as well. You've spoken in the past about the importance of being okay with disappointing people around you sometimes. How did you personally get to that point of acceptance?
Well, first of all, I feel like I need to proudly say that I'm the disappointment of my family. Like, I've got tattoos, I've moved out, I've been rebellious, and I feel like that was my entry level. That was like my entrance into a world where I can actually live on my terms and not have to worry about who feels let down by me choosing myself, because people are always going to feel let down by you choosing yourself. You choosing yourself means that they have less leverage and power to manipulate you or make you or coerce you into doing something you don't really want to do. And I think we're all going to have to learn that under a capitalist system, it's inevitable that we're going to disappoint the very people that benefit from us knowing ourselves and loving each other. And that's something that I want us to learn to embrace more. I think this past summer, we learned that disappointment is a necessary part of us resisting a world that literally chews on all of us. And when we embrace disappointment, even in our interpersonal relationships, I think we all get to a stage where we learn that, like, it's bigger than letting other people down, and it's more about what about letting yourself down? Because if I'm pleasing everyone around me, but I'm deep down going to bed feeling inauthentic, I've betrayed myself. And betrayal of self will always hurt more than betraying someone else. Maybe we're so numb to it that we don't really feel it when we betray ourselves, but we do pay that price daily in how low our self-esteem becomes, which feeds into the kinds of people we welcome into our lives and how we let them treat us and what we think we're deserving of and how far we aspire. All these things play a role in who we feel like we deserve to be and how much we let ourselves have the chance to see that.
Now, to finish off, I can't believe I'm saying we've got to finish off already, but to finish off, what is your number one tip for anyone watching right now who is lacking confidence, wants to start that journey, push that journey forward to being their most authentic self, but is maybe lacking in confidence in order to kickstart it?
I would say you don't have to have a grandiose goal of like becoming an uber mega star one day. That doesn't have to be it. And because that probably won't even make you feel confident. I think it starts with, it's like I tend to say, activism begins at home, right? And loving yourself is a form of activism because it begins with your interpersonal relationships, those closest to you. How are the people closest to you treating you? What do you allow? What do people genuinely think they can get away with you? What are the new rules you're going to write for yourself? And who loves you enough to follow those rules? Because sometimes the rules are going to change as you go along. And that's normally how a relationship works, where you're tweaking and changing things. And that should similarly apply to your relationship with yourself, where for a particular period, you're going to be this particular version of yourself. And you need to love that version of yourself. Because when you change, you will appreciate that version of you in the past that led you to where you are now. So I think it comes down to really taking it in baby steps and appreciating each micro mini milestone that is going to be invisible to most people. Because one day it's going to be visible and people will be very surprised because they will never see it come in because you've been quietly away working at yourself and then you just come out of nowhere like a star. And you know what? Feeling like a star isn't something that necessarily only happens if you're a celebrity. I think feeling like a star is genuinely overcoming the bad voice inside and overcoming the invisible battles no one's ever going to see, because that really anchors your character and you're always going to have a root to refer to when you do have dark times and you remember, I've been through worse. If anything, I've been through this before and I survived the last time. And due to me surviving the last time, I now have the tools to get through this time. And it's a constant state of doing that and constantly remembering that, yes, we need community and yes, we have the right to seek it, but also like really having that for yourself and being that for yourself first is, I think, the ultimate root of our power as individuals.
Chidera, thank you so much for joining us today and for those gorgeous, wise words. I really appreciate it. And now back to Ria.